Hey guys, welcome back to another ranking video, and I just want to start off by saying happy Halloween to everybody, and I hope you're all staying as safe as you possibly can out there. Now today, I'm going to be ranking my own personal list for the Halloween series. Now, this ranking is by no means definitive and is based off my own personal criteria. So if our lists don't match, don't take it personally. I may be looking at certain aspects of the film that could be different from yours. That being said, let's begin. We start off with what is, in my opinion, the worst film in the franchise. Between the horrid mask design, the look of the Myers house, and the Man in Black appearance, and the lackluster explanation of how Michael survived getting shot, negating a fantastic ending in part 4 where Jamie was set up to be the next killer. This film offers little to nothing and feels like it was just made as a cash grab with no regard to continuity or respect to the IP. The entertainment and fun factor just never seems to be there enough for me to rewatch, outside of the intro, which is a recap of part 4, which doesn't really count in regards to Halloween 5 as a whole, which is why it lands itself on the bottom of my list as number 11. Number 10, Halloween Resurrection. This film, as it stands in its theatrical version, is very much like Halloween 5, in way of being a complete cash grab, following the success of H2O. Except it does have a fun factor, and is pretty entertaining at times. The premise was also a good one at its core, but it also suffers from its previous film's ending and having a tough task at retconning Michael's death with something so nonsensible that the reasoning gets dumber every time you see it. Not to mention Michael himself. The mask, it's a pretty good one here, minus the hair, but the purpose of him killing seems to be pretty empty in terms of motivation. For over 20 years he's hunted his sister, staying quiet enough to not be discovered while, according to Loomis, still killing, or at least it's presumed, but decides to kill an entire reality show cast live for all to see just because they entered his house. I would assume that a guy aware enough that he should get into a disguise to escape being captured in the previous film would also be smart enough to avoid widespread detection from an actual show with cameras everywhere. It's with these flaws, which is why Halloween Resurrection is ranked 10th on my list. Number 9, Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. Brutal and gory, this film has all the makings of a really good slasher film. My issues with it begins at the very first scene we see Michael's mother in a ghostly form, which wouldn't have been as much of a shock if it were introduced in the previous film, especially over the 15-year time skip. While it still would have felt more like a Jason thing rather than Michael, at least it would have felt more organic and make sense and not just thrown in. Becoming as much of a distraction as the dialogue and sometimes acting, the story feels a bit meh, due to Michael just deciding, at the request of his mother, to return to Haddonfield and find Laurie again and kill her, I assume, to become a family again. Which makes me wonder, why wasn't this the plan in part 1? Instead of taking Laurie and handing her a picture, and then there's Michael speaking. While most fans hate that Michael told Loomis to die, and tear the film apart based on that one line. I don't like it for the simple reason of, if Michael can speak and he was so obsessed with Laurie, why didn't he speak to her in Halloween 1? Especially considering that the lengthy amount of time had passed and there would be no other way for her to know his identity, and they were alone in the basement of the Myers house. Never made sense to me. Overall, the film is fun and definitely entertaining, but the dialogue and lack of attention to continuity greatly affects its rewatchability for me, landing it at my 9th spot on the list. Halloween H2O. The first reboot of the Myers series, this film is pretty fun and entertaining and definitely has a rewatchability factor, but the more you watch, the more evident the flaws in it are shown, starting with the tone that has now shifted to a more CW show-like kind of tone, and its dialogue and actors making it super hyper stylized in the same vein as Scream and I Know What You Did Last Summer, which detracts from the Halloween identity that was established in the original Halloween and Halloween 2, which this film is meant to be a sequel of, making it a bit of a jarring experience when watching them in order. And then there's Michael himself. Losing a lot of his scare factor here, he comes off as a more generic slasher than the iconic killer we know. As for his story up to this point, we are given little to no explanation on how he survived the hospital explosion, which somehow Loomis survived too. Just that his body was never found, yet he shows no burn scars at all, even though we literally see him burning at the end of Halloween 2. And nothing outside of presumed kills by Michael being carried out over the last 20 years, according to Loomis's board during the intro, to explain what he's been doing all of this time. Overall, it feels like the film could have been better, but it's still enjoyable and worth a watch, which is why I rank it at number 8. Number 7. Rob Zombie's Halloween. This film is definitely a lot better than I initially gave it credit for, making Michael incredibly terrorizing with his physicality, making him a tank that is relentless and unmerciful in what he does to his victims. Very similar to what I like about Jason. The issues for me begins with Rob Zombie taking a more standard approach with how Michael got to his psychopathic ways and explains away the mystery of the boogeyman. Instead, giving us an annoying characterization of Kid Michael in a prequel portion of the remake that honestly could have been cut from the film. The dialogue is pretty standard for a Rob Zombie film, but once we get to the actual Halloween segment, it gets pretty intense and is really well done, giving it a huge rewatchability factor if you can make it past the Kid Myers stuff, landing it at my number 7 spot. Number 6. Halloween 3. Season of the Witch. A great attempt at turning the Halloween franchise into an anthology series, sadly falling flat with fans at the time for much of the same reason Friday the 13th Part 5 was ridiculed. Its main killer from the previous films being absent, except a brief appearance on a TV commercial. Halloween 3 has a unique story that only gets better for me the more I watch it, and is highly recommended that you go in with a clear mind and no connection to Michael Myers. Everything from the soundtrack to the kills are done in a vintage 80s style, which also works to its advantage, and the only drawbacks is its acting. in some areas are a bit meh, and some of the character reveals and decisions near the end also a bit questionable. Overall though, this film could have been higher on my list, but I factored in rewatchability. While it does have that, it's nowhere near the levels of the films above it. If you haven't watched it yet, I would definitely say check it out for yourself. Don't let other opinions of this film throughout the years sway you. Might be surprised. Number 5. Next up is Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers. An extremely entertaining film with a brutal version of Michael, a great mask, and some pretty good kills. The flaws for me with this film is the fact that they recasted Jamie Lloyd and killed her off just to have Michael hunt his child, whom he fathered with Jamie, which was absolutely unnecessary and was a poor way to expand on the Cult of Thorn, especially since Danny Strode could have easily become a new target of Michael. Even if it was revealed that the Strodes somehow share Michael's bloodline, which would have better explained why Lloyd was adopted by them. I don't know. Anything other than a baby would have been better in my opinion. But still, overall, this film is still pretty fun and always a blast to watch, and False Aside deserves its spot at my number 5 on my list. Number 4. Next up is the film I'm willing to bet is going to make the hardcore Halloween fans cringe a bit, but my 4th ranked film of the series is the original Halloween from 1978. Now don't get me wrong, it's the absolute best and scariest Michael has ever looked, and the way he's performed is flawless. The rewatchability is absolutely there as well, especially this time of year. The only reason it's not higher for me, it's the slow burn of the story, which isn't the film's fault. It just carries on a bit too long before we get down to it, at least for me, which is likely due to my preference set for the Friday the 13th series and how quickly things unfold in an episodic-like fashion in the first 5 or 6 films. The acting for some of the characters, like Annie and Linda, are a bit bland as well, or just outright boring and a bit cringy at times. Donald Pleasance, clearly being as much of a standout performer as Betsy Palmer was as Pamela Voorhees. This film, once it gets going, is fantastic and always worth a watch, and I can see why fans of the series would rank it higher on their lists. But for me, I think it fits comfortably at number 4 based on my overall enjoyment and compared to the final 3 films. I think I can watch them a little bit more than I can watch this on a repeat cycle. Number 3. Next up is Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, which is an extremely entertaining film that to me still has the best ending of the series. The only issues I can see is the mask lacking the scare factor the original had, not to mention the moment it changes color for a scene, and the awkward scenes where Michael Myers was kind of forced to wear shoulder pads to look more imposing and actually ended up looking ridiculous. But it absolutely gets the tone right, and the performances together of Loomis and Jamie work so well in conveying the emotions of both characters, which help drive the narrative in a more effective way than I believe the other films below this movie did, at least for me. The rewatchability is really high for me here too, as the film shows exactly how dangerous Michael is, and staying true to both Halloween 1 and 2 at the same time, all while evolving the boogeyman, which is what ranks this film at number 3 for me on my list. Now, these last two films for me are interchangeable based on my mood, but at the time of making this video, my number 2 ranked film is the original Halloween 2. Mostly because of its episodic format, tone, soundtrack, and Michael himself being absolutely terrifying. The only issues I have with it is Laurie Strode, who is drugged out practically the entire film, which to me kind of creates a feeling of annoyance in those instances where she can't yell or see straight. Other than that, the film is phenomenally done, and I can find myself watching it at any moment and thoroughly enjoy the movie like the first time I saw it. Number 1. For anybody that has been paying attention, obviously, Halloween 2018 is one of my 2 favorites of the series, which could likely be because of it feeling like a throwback to 80s slasher films in the modern day, and the amount of detail crafted in this film is great, like Michael's dead eye, Laurie's scar, and to me it felt like an organic follow-up to the original. The only issues I had here were cringy scenes like Laurie coming out of the shadows behind Michael like he did to her in 1978, Dr. Sartain wearing the mask, Michael getting shot and essentially running away from Laurie. Practically anything that demeaned Michael in one way or another, making him look weak. But overall, like part 2, I can find myself literally watching this film on repeat and never getting tired of it. The tone may not 100% match the original, but for me it delivered a Halloween vibe and atmosphere, which so many films in the series lacked. Michael is very brutal and has been likened to being a clone of part 3 and 4 Jason here, which could be another reason why I'm loving it so much. Although I do understand that there could also be a negative to that for others, especially hardcore Halloween fans that prefer their Michael Myers to act more reserved as he did in the original. But for me, Halloween 2018 stands as my number 1 film in the series. And alright guys, that is my ranking of the Halloween series. Let me know what your ranking is, or even you agree with my rankings. Comment below. I look forward to hearing from you guys. Meanwhile, make sure you guys are hitting that like button and subscribing, as well as hitting the notification bell to be alerted whenever a new video is uploaded. And also, be sure to join the Discord or the Facebook group, JG Darhk's Hordes of Horror, as well as following me on Twitch when I go live playing Dead by Daylight or possibly another horror game at some point in the near future. I look forward to seeing you guys there, and seeing you in the chat always brightens my night. That being said, I'm going to wrap it up here. You guys have a happy Halloween, and I will catch you guys in the next one. And as always, I am JG Darhk, and thanks for watching.